Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Soul IV podcast. Today, we're going to be doing the topic on Mental Health Monday. What is the point of the Soul IV podcast? The Soul IV podcast exists because when I was an EMT, I noticed that a lot of people didn't understand mental illness. And that's with us medical workers included. A lot of people that I worked with on the ambulance, they didn't understand schizophrenia. They didn't understand psychosis, bipolar disorder. And the way that we used to talk to people, we would be respectful, but me looking back on it now, I could tell that there is a big just stigma and misunderstanding about mental illness. So my the goal of this is to educate the public, educate the workers, educate everyone, even educate the people that are struggling. I learned there's a lot of people that are struggling with mental illness, and maybe they got a diagnosis, maybe they didn't, but they don't understand what they're going through. And nobody explained it to them, and nobody told them why or even how to get better. Which brings me to another point. Sometimes we go through things, and people who are not in the field, people who don't know much about mental illness, try to help people to their detriment, or people try to help themselves to their own detriment. A lot of the people that I've encountered on the street when I was working with the police department are on drugs, and a lot of them are struggling with mental illness, and a lot of them self-medicate with fentanyl, with methamphetamine, with marijuana, with whatever they could get their hands on. That's their way of treating their condition. Some people they're just in such a bad place that they don't want to be them. Some people, there's people out there that know that they failed their family, they failed their children, they failed in life, and that they're just stuck in this deep, deep hole, and they feel hopeless and helpless, like there's no way out. And so it's better for them to hide in alcohol or hide in the drugs to give themselves some respite of not existing in a life of failure and disappointment. And then when they start to get sober again and all those feelings start to come back, they get high again or they drink again, just to dive right back into that. It's a way of escaping their problems. But we all know they're not really escaping from it. They're not really helping themselves. And so I've learned on my journey that there are people that want help, and the help that's offered to them or told to them is not actually helpful. And it usually puts people in a worse position. Mental illness could affect not just the person, it could affect their social life, so their jobs, their relationship with their children. It could affect their relationships with their mothers and fathers. And it fans out. It when it gets bad enough, it starts to affect every aspect of their life. Church, it affects. Now I can't make money. Now I can't buy food for my family. It just gets worse and worse. And most of these conditions do not get better on their own. You can't just ignore it and hope to wake up one day and it's all going to be over. They don't get better. So it's important that people learn what's going on with them and find the right type of help. So that's why this podcast exists, because I want to point people in the right direction. I want to educate people. I want to talk about the hard topics that nobody likes to talk about, explain what a certain condition is and what it isn't, because the stuff we see on TV, most of it is not accurate to what somebody really struggling with a condition is. So I want to help shine light in these areas so that we as a community could do better by these people. All right. So on this episode, I want to talk about some of the stigmas, the things that are just not true about mental illness. They're not true, and if you've heard this or somebody has said this to you, or if it's a belief that you hold, it's time to just let that go. Let's get rid of that right now because it's absolutely not true. So the first stigma is they're faking it. You see somebody acting up in the store. You see somebody acting up at your school. You see your brother, your sister acting up and acting out. Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, something, and you think that they're faking it. You think that they're doing it on purpose. I can tell you, when I worked in the county hospital, 99% of my patients were not faking it. I might have had one patient who I thought may have been faking it, but if he was faking it, and this is me having seen mental illness at its worst, seen it in all capacities. There's some things that it's no point in faking. There's some things that if you're trying to garner attention or whatever if you're trying to gain something by faking it, you think nobody's looking at you. There's certain things you won't do when you think nobody's looking if you're faking it. Now, I did see somebody not necessarily faking their mental illness, but faking how bad it was. We did see that. There was a guy who had slipped and fell in the hospital, and nobody was looking directly at him. We saw him fall kind of in our peripheral vision. And when we went over to help him, he pretended like he couldn't understand us, like he had hit his head, like he was faking a head injury. The reason why I believed he was faking a head injury is because he would act like he was in pain, or he would act like he couldn't hear us. He would have his eyes closed, and he would open one eye, look around to see if we were paying attention. And if we were looking, he would go back into it like that. And when we kind of backed away and kind of gave him his space, at first he was saying he couldn't move, and then when he got uncomfortable on the floor, he would just easily move himself to be comfortable, and then he sat up and leaned against something, and then, faking it. He was there for on a 5150 for a different condition, though, and he did show signs of that reason for being there. There are some people that fake certain things, but when it comes to depression, anxiety, it's not just as simple as they're faking it. Most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, it's not just as simple as get over it or just stop. Just stop. Most of the time, it's not just that simple. Another stigma is people are doing this for attention. And although there are some people who have that narcissistic behavior that they have to be the center of attention, majority of the patients that I've seen in my years as a psych tech, doing it because they want attention is part of the mental illness. It's part of it. Now, there's always going to be a few. I don't like using blanket statements, one statement that represents everybody in this category. I don't like using that. So there's always going to be a few that, like your class clowns, somebody that acts up because they want attention. But when you start to look deeper, you start to peel the layers back, you realize that some people do things for attention because they were neglected. So there is something mentally going on there. It's a symptom of something deeper that's going on. They may have been neglected. They may not have gotten attention from mom and dad or from other people in life. They may have been passed around as far as growing up in a foster care. So they never had a real bond with a parental figure. So some people do things to get in trouble, to get that attention from an adult or to get that attention from somebody that they enjoy. The thing is, that's part of the mental illness. That's a part of it. When people say that usually, oh, they're just doing it for attention, that is a sure sign. If that's your go-to when you see something happening, that's a sure sign that most people don't understand what is actually going on in mental illness. I heard it said before that something like bipolar disorder is overly diagnosed, and that people would just bad tempers. You have a temper, and you like yelling at people, and you go off on somebody that they're diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and they can control it, but they don't want to. So the problem with that is that's not what bipolar disorder is. But that's what a lot of people believe. They think people with bipolar disorder are somebody who could be quiet one moment and just snap and yell and scream and be really nasty and brutal to somebody, and then a little while later be perfectly fine. Yeah, that's not how we would diagnose bipolar disorder. But there's people out there that believe that. So, stigma, destroy that. Another one is if you tried hard enough, you could will yourself out of this mental disorder or this mental illness. So, like anxiety, if you tried to push anxiety out of your mind, you could if you just tried hard enough. Or somebody who's depressed, if you just stopped thinking negative thoughts and you started pursuing good, you could just push it out. And then other people will throw in the idea, I was depressed at one point and I pushed myself. I did it without medication, without counselors, without therapy. I got myself out of it. And you could too. So let me tell you the issues with that way of thinking. Number one, when you compare your situation to somebody else's, that already shows that you don't have a good understanding of it. Your depression, number one, might not be as bad as that person's depression. Number two, the tools that you grew up with, the lessons that you learned in life when you were younger, the things that maybe your parents or your guardian, somebody instilled in you growing up, maybe that person doesn't have those tools. They don't have that way of thinking like you do to pull themselves out of a bad situation. And you can't just mentally put that on somebody. If they don't have it, they don't have it. Depression, just like all mental illness, it's not a one size fit all. You can't say that two people experiencing depression are equal. No, not the case. It's like that with all mental illness. Um, there's different levels to it. There's different avenues of it because some people grow up in different cultures. So what makes you depressed might not make another person depressed. So, example, some people grew up hard. They grew up in a poor environment with tough parents and a rough upbringing. So they're more conditioned to handle that type of thing versus a person who grew up in a good area with good parents, and then that person loses a parent, and then a step parent comes in, and this person is nasty and brutal. That person might not have the mentality to handle that, and it will start affecting them mentally. Unlike a person who grew up hard, they may be better mentally equipped to deal with something like that. Number one, don't compare your situation to somebody else's. And don't say just because I did it, you could do it too. I understand the thinking. I understand why we want to say that because you don't want to see somebody you care about struggling with something. I get it. And you want to give them hope. You want to let them know that it's within them to pull themselves out of it. And for some people, that might be true. For some people, that might be true. But some of the patients that I've seen, I'll give you an example. We had a lady come in to the hospital and she refused to speak with anyone. She was brought in on the 5150. I don't remember what it was for. She refused to speak with anyone. And she was terrified. If I had to guess, I would believe she was struggling with some type of PTSD because she tucked herself into a bed in the corner of the female room, furthest away from the door. And she was terrified. She thought somebody was going to attack her. And although the nursing and all the staff, the doctors were really nice and was really working with her, she was still untrusting of us and didn't cooperate with anything. She was so bad that she would not even go to the restroom. She had to urinate, but she refused to go to the restroom. And so she just went on herself. So she's covered in her own urine. And when we found out, we're like, hey, why didn't you go to the restroom? We would have took you to the restroom. She, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, here, we're going to help you change. We'll let you take a shower and we'll give you a change of clothes so you don't have to sit in that. No, I don't want to. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't want to. Okay. So we can see clearly she's struggling with anxiety and other things. And she's terrified. She's scared. Even when we offered her medication, she wouldn't take the medication that would help with anxiety. She wouldn't take the medication, or she would pretend to take it. And we can clearly see that she's holding the pill in her hand, but she said, oh no, I took it. Like, no, what's that? Open your hand. She don't want to open her hand. Open your hand. She opens her hand, the pill's in there. Why didn't you take it? You don't have to. We're not going to force you to take this medication, but don't lie to us and tell her she took it. We're just trying to help you. These are things that I've seen in the hospital. So if you look at that person, you say, oh, just snap out of it. Just snap out of it and get up, and you come down harder on somebody like that, they're going to further regress into their mind. Not everybody can just will themselves out of it. Some of them have some really deep issues that need to be properly addressed. And from what I've learned in school is majority of people do not know how to properly address deep-seated mental issues. Abandonment, abuse, sexual abuse, loss, cheating. There's some victims of all these things that we as a society don't know how to help somebody who's going through it. We think we do. Or a lot of times what we'll do is we'll talk to somebody how in a way that would help us if we were in that situation. The thing is, somebody else's situation is not equal to yours. What would help you, the words that would help you may not help another person. One more stigma in this area is people use their mental illness as a reason to act out. So this goes with somebody who was diagnosed with whatever they're diagnosed with. Now they're using that as their reason to do whatever they want. So they maybe they're diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and so they go and they act out. Oh, it's just my bipolar acting up, or people are depressed. I don't want to go to work today. I am struggling with depression, so I think I'm going to skip work today. That may, that's a stigma that may have some truth to it, but again, we have to understand what the person is going through. And somebody who's having who's experiencing psychosis, where reality is distorted for that person, and then on top of the distortion of reality, maybe they're hearing voices that aren't there, or they're seeing figures that aren't there, or they're smelling a smell that nobody else could smell, and on top of that, they're believing an event, or they're believing something that is not congruent with what's really going on. You see things like that, and you say, oh, this person's he knows he was diagnosed with this, and so now he's just acting up, and he's using that to get what he wants, or to do whatever he wants to do. A lot of these people end up in the hospital, and generally they don't get what they want. They're not getting away with anything. So we just have to use understanding and sympathy when it comes to working with somebody that is struggling with mental illness. On another related topic, I want to just hit on some religious stigmas that I've seen. One common thing that I'm seeing that I feel needs to be addressed is the way the church handles mental illness. Unfortunately, there's some things that we can work on as a whole church body. I'm not talking to any particular denomination. And I have noticed there are some churches that are doing it right. They're doing a great job with it, that have embraced certain things that I'm going to talk about. while other churches are still kind of behind and not willing to accept how things really are. So one stigma is a person might be struggling with mental illness because they have unconfessed sin in their life. That's a really unfortunate that is really prevalent in the church community. You're going through this because you have a sin that you haven't confessed to God. So God has kind of put this on you and punishing you. Or maybe God didn't put it on you. God allowed you to experience this in order to bring you closer to Him. I don't like that one because you can say that with anything. You caught COVID because of unconfessed sin in your life. You got diabetes because of unconfessed sin in your life. You lost your child, which I've heard people say, because of unconfessed sin in your life. So God is out here dealing out punishments to people that love and worship Him because they have unconfessed sin in their life. That is not a healthy approach. And I honestly believe if you are a church person and you're saying this to people, you really should re-examine your approach to helping somebody who's struggling with this. Another one is God won't heal you because you don't have enough faith. Oh my gosh. I absolutely hate this argument. You don't have enough faith. So you don't have enough faith. So there's things that happen in your life because you didn't have enough faith. You didn't walk in faith. If that was true, we would see more churches actually working as hospitals and healing people, healing the sick, and people in the church would be healthy because they're walking in faith and faith is keeping them health free. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Another thing is this is a punishment from God. So that goes into generational curses, and God is punishing somebody because I guess that goes back to unconfessed sin. When it comes to mental illness, there's usually a link to the person's upbringing, to trauma or a crisis, or some event that started to set things off and made things mentally unravel. So that will mean that God caused, if you're going to say this is a punishment from God, that means you're saying that God caused my parents to beat me, caused my dad to sexually abuse me, to punish me for something that I might do later on down the line. Because a lot of these mental illnesses, they stem from what happened in childhood. Some type of crisis, some type of big event, or even a series of little events that wasn't properly explained to the person. They weren't able to work through the situation. So they're stuck in that traumatic moment in their mind. So when you say that this is a punishment from God, what you're actually saying is God knew years before you would commit whatever sin that God's punishing you for, that you were going to commit that sin. So He started the process of punishing you back when you were small. But then if you really look at it, though, the reason why dad sexually abused daughter is because he was sexually abused. So God started punishing you way before you even conceived, because in order for a female's dad to sexually abuse the daughter, he would have had to initiate or set up that guy would be sexually abused by somebody else and just passing it down. When you really think about it, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Not only does it not add up, but let's look at this from the other part of it. Imagine you are somebody who's struggling with some sort of mental illness, and you are aware that it's affecting all these areas of your life, and you go to a church for help, and somebody tells you it's because you haven't confessed your sin. That's why you're going through this. Or God is punishing you for something that you've done. Or God wants to heal you, but you don't have enough faith. So it's my fault that I'm going through this, is what you're saying. That's what it all comes down to. It's your fault. That's not going to help a person who's struggling, who's barely hanging on, and they're struggling and they really need the help. That's not helping them. And church, this is not sustainable. We've got to stop. We've got to stop. We've got to reassess and better our approach to these situations. And the last stigma, religious stigma I want to talk about is people say, oh, I've actually heard a pastor say this, and he was talking directly to me. He said, I believe schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar disorder, those are just all forms of demon manifestation in a person. So, again, this comes with not understanding the condition, not understanding what's really going on. You think you have an idea of what's going on, but when you really look into it, when you really start to learn and research, you see that that excuse doesn't add up. It does not. There are a lot of pastors, a lot of teachings from the pulpit, and a lot of Christians that just believe this, that mental illness is a form of demonic possession or spiritual oppression or something along the lines of that. And if you knew what I knew, which I will teach you all as we go through these podcast episodes, what schizophrenia really looks like, and then you look at what demon possession looks like in the Bible, you would see that there are almost no similarities between the two. There might be a few that are similar, but two completely different things. And I'll just give you one example of why I know for a fact that schizophrenia, we'll take schizophrenia because that's the most demonized one. Why schizophrenia is not demon possession? Because I have seen people in psychosis that were diagnosed with schizophrenia who are in church praising the Lord, or they're in the hospital praising the Lord. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody in the hospital on a 5150 hold for danger to others or danger to self, and they're pacing around talking to themselves. They're yelling at themselves, they're cursing at themselves, and they come and they say, hey, can I have a Bible? And we give them Bibles in the hospital. We give them Bibles and they sit down and they read scripture. Now tell me this, would you ever see a demon asking for a Bible and reading the Bible? Would you ever see a demon actively worshiping God? Does that make any sense to you? A demon going to church, going to the altar, laying down and praising, saying, thank you, Jesus, heal me, heal me. Does that sound like somebody who's demon possessed to you? So those are all the stigmas I want to cover today. If you guys have stigmas that you've heard or something that you believe, put them in the comments. Put them in the comments. Let me know what you guys have heard or what you guys are thinking. Ultimately, at the end of the day, mental illness is something that we're just now in America, at least, we're just now starting to see and acknowledge that mental illness exists. And we're starting to see the importance of mental health. But we are still we're still leagues away of being in a position where we could really help our children, help our parents, help our neighbors, our schoolmates, our coworkers, our employees. We're still far away from that. There's still not a large understanding. And even in the hospitals, like in a medical hospital, there's nurses and doctors who don't have to deal with mental illness a lot. They don't have as good of an understanding as somebody who works in a psychiatric hospital. So my goal is to educate you guys, educate on every level that I can, because I want people who are struggling with this to know that there is hope. There is hope out there, and there are resources for you. This isn't the end. Your life doesn't have to be terrible. There's going to be hard days. There's going to be good days. But there are people that understand and want to help you. That's my message to you and to people that know somebody who's struggling with mental illness. Sometimes you feel like there's nothing you could do. It's impossible. I get it. Sometimes it feels like no matter what you do, you don't think you're making the situation better. This is why I created this platform. This is why I'm here to encourage you guys. I'm here to promote healing, not tear people down. In closing, what I'd like to say is let's do this healing together. Let's do this recovery together. Let's help each other out. Share this with somebody who's going through something. Share this with somebody who you think it would benefit. There's going to be a lot more episodes. I have interviews with psychologists, with pastors, with people who are actively in the field working with clients who are struggling. And I plan on getting people who are currently struggling with different mental illnesses and interviewing them. So there's a lot to come. There's a lot to look forward to. Thank you all for being on this journey with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking around to the end. This has been the Soul IV podcast. You guys stay blessed.